12 engines, 169 passengers. If those numbers make you pause for a moment and wonder whether you read them correctly, that is exactly the right reaction. Because what we are about to explore was not a vision of the future, not a proposal sketched on paper by an idealistic engineer, and not a Hollywood fantasy. It was real. It flew. And when the world first laid eyes on it, in 1929, nobody quite believed it either. The Dornier Do X was the largest aircraft ever built at the time of its creation. It was wider than many buildings, heavier than anything that had dared to call itself an airplane, and it was designed not merely to cross the Atlantic, but to do so in a manner that would make the passengers forget, somewhere over the open ocean, that they were not in a floating palace. This was not aviation as utility. This was aviation as theater, as statement, as spectacle, and the story of how it came to exist, who built it, what happened inside it, and why it ultimately vanished from history is one of the most extraordinary and largely forgotten chapters in the entire saga of human flight. Today we are going to go inside the Do X. We are going to walk through its cabins, sit at its tables, feel the vibration of those 12 engines through the soles of our shoes, and understand what it actually felt like to be one of the very few people on Earth who ever boarded this machine. And by the end, I think you will agree that what the world lost when the Do X disappeared was not just an aircraft. It was an entire philosophy of what travel could be. But let us begin where every truly improbable story must begin, with a question that sounds almost impolite to ask out loud. In 1926, Europe was still rebuilding from one of the most destructive wars in human history. Germany, in particular, was under severe restrictions. The Treaty of Versailles had specifically forbidden the German aviation industry from building large aircraft. It was a deliberate attempt to prevent the nation from developing the kind of aerial capacity that could once again threaten the continent. And yet, in a small Swiss town on the southern shore of Lake Constance, a German engineer was quietly doing exactly that. How does something like this happen? And more importantly, why did nobody stop him? The man at the center of this story was Claude Dornier. He had been building flying boats since before the First World War, working first under the great Count Zeppelin, to learning everything there was to know about large-scale aircraft construction. By the mid-1920s, Dornier had established his own company and was already respected throughout the aviation world. But he was not interested in building something competent or commercially sensible. He was interested in building something that had never been built before. The location of his facility in Altenrhein, on the Swiss side of Lake Constance, was not accidental. Switzerland was neutral territory. The restrictions of Versailles did not apply there in the same way. Dornier used this geographic loophole with extraordinary precision, establishing his production operation just across the German border, in a place where he could work without constant oversight from the Allied Control Commission. Or the aircraft that would emerge from that lakeside factory was technically built in Switzerland by a German company for a German purpose. Whether this was clever engineering of a legal grey area or a quiet act of defiance against the post-war order depends on how generously you choose to read history. What is beyond dispute is that when the Do X finally rolled out and met the water for the first time, the world had no precedent for what it was looking at. The statistics alone were enough to stop conversation. The wingspan stretched to nearly 48 meters. The hull was over 40 meters long. The aircraft had 3 decks, and mounted on a massive parasol wing above the fuselage were 12 engines, arranged in 6 tandem pairs, each pair consisting of 1 engine facing forward and 1 facing rearward. But the pusher-puller configuration that gave the Do X its unmistakable silhouette. The combined power of those engines, when they were all functioning correctly, which was not always guaranteed, exceeded 6,000 horsepower. Nothing in the sky came close. And here is where the story begins to get genuinely interesting, because the numbers, as impressive as they are, tell you very little about what this machine actually was. The Do X was not designed to be the fastest aircraft in the world, or the most militarily capable, or the most efficient. It was designed to be, in the most literal sense possible, a flying ocean liner. And if you want to understand what that phrase actually meant for the people who flew on it, you need to stop thinking about airplanes and start thinking about ships. In the late 1920s, the great transatlantic ocean liners represented the pinnacle of civilized travel. Ships like the Ile-de-France and the Bremen offered their first-class passengers a world of paneled dining rooms, promenade decks, smoking lounges, and staterooms furnished like the finest hotels in Paris or London. The crossing took days, and those days were meant to be enjoyed. There was a culture surrounding ocean travel that understood delay not as inconvenience, but as opportunity. The journey itself was the experience. And Claude Dornier, looking at those ships, asked a question that seems almost naive in its audacity. Why should the air not offer the same thing? Can you imagine boarding an aircraft and walking through a door into a world that looks nothing like the word aircraft suggests to you? Because the passengers who boarded the Do X on its most famous flights did not enter a tube filled with seats. They entered a series of interconnected cabins, each one designed with a specific atmosphere and purpose that together created something closer to a private club than a vehicle. The interior of the Do X was arranged across 3 main cabin sections within the main deck. There was a smoking cabin, which was actually a proper lounge, upholstered in rich fabrics, furnished with chairs designed for lingering, lit in a way that invited conversation. There was a sitting room. There was a dining cabin that could seat all the passengers for a formal meal. And at the rear of the aircraft, there was something that almost no other flying machine had attempted: a proper bar serving drinks, with surfaces and furnishings that would not have looked out of place in a good Berlin restaurant of the era. The seating configuration was deliberately relaxed. Passengers did not face forward in regimented rows. They could turn, arrange themselves, move from section to section. The windows were large by the standards of the time, and when the Do X was flying low over the water, as it often was, those windows offered a panorama that no ocean liner could ever match. You were not looking at the horizon from deck level. You were above it, moving through it, watching the surface of the Atlantic or the Mediterranean slip beneath you in a way that no human being had ever been able to watch before. This is where one begins to understand that this was a different way of traveling. Not faster than a ship, not necessarily more comfortable in every material sense, but fundamentally different in what it offered the imagination. You were suspended between the ocean and the sky, inside a machine that weighed more than 50 tons. And yet the experience was designed to make you forget the machine entirely. If you are finding this story as fascinating as I am, this would be a wonderful moment to subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. We cover exactly these kinds of stories: the aircraft that history forgot, the experiences that no longer exist, the moments when elegance and engineering came together in ways we have never quite managed to repeat. And there is a great deal more of that ahead, so stay with us. Now, let us talk about what actually happened when those 12 engines came to life, because that, as several witnesses made clear, was an experience in itself. The sound of a single engine of that era was already substantial. 12 of them, arranged in pairs directly above the passenger deck, created a noise and a vibration that no amount of interior decoration could entirely disguise. Passengers felt the Do X as much as they flew in it. The hull hummed, the windows trembled slightly. And when the aircraft began its takeoff run across the surface of the water, accelerating slowly, almost majestically, you understood through your entire body that something enormous was attempting. Something it had perhaps not been entirely designed to do. The Do X's relationship with takeoff was, to put it diplomatically, complicated. The aircraft was heavy. It was very heavy. And its 12 engines, while powerful on paper, but were not always up to the task of lifting that weight efficiently in all conditions. Early flights revealed that the Do X could struggle in warm weather or at altitude, where the thinner air reduced engine performance. There were occasions when the crew resorted to burning fuel simply to reduce the aircraft's weight enough to get it airborne. There was even a flight during which not all 12 engines were functioning simultaneously, and the aircraft managed somehow to continue. The most surprising thing is that this really happened, repeatedly, and the passengers, in at least some cases, appear not to have been alarmed. Perhaps because the experience inside was sufficiently distracting. Or perhaps because people in 1929 had a different relationship with mechanical uncertainty than we do today. And once in the air and settled at its cruising altitude, which was typically quite low by modern standards, often only a few hundred meters above the sea, the Do X offered something that its passengers almost universally described in similar terms. They described it as peaceful. Not silent, because it was never silent, but peaceful in the sense that the rhythm of the engines became a kind of constant, a background presence like the sound of a ship's engines deep in the hull, and the world outside the windows had a quality of light and distance that none of them had encountered before. Think about what it meant to look out of a window at that height in 1929. The passengers on commercial ships saw the sea from the waterline. The passengers on trains saw the countryside rushing past at a level no higher than a second-story window. The passengers of the Do X looked down at the ocean from above, watching the shadow of their enormous aircraft moving across the water below, watching the way the light changed the color of the sea from hour to hour. Several of them wrote about it afterward. The language they used was not the language of transport. It was closer to the language of wonder. Let us also be honest about the food and drink, because in a vehicle of this ambition, those things mattered. The Do X carried a proper galley, staffed by crew members whose job was to prepare and serve meals during flight. The menus were not elaborate by the standards of the great ocean liners, but they were real meals, not sandwiches, not provisions in the utilitarian sense. Passengers sat down at a proper table in a cabin designed for the purpose and ate together, or the bar served proper drinks. The ambiance, given what surrounded it, was remarkable. There is something deeply human about eating a meal while in flight above the ocean, something that connects to the oldest instincts of hospitality and civilization, the sense that wherever you are, you can still gather, share food, and feel, at least temporarily, at home. The designers of the Do X understood this. The aircraft was built around the idea that its passengers should never feel that their comfort had been sacrificed for the sake of the machine. And now we arrive at the third act of this story, which is where the grandeur becomes complicated, where the spectacle begins to reveal its shadows, and where the question we began with comes back with a new and quieter weight. The Do X made its most celebrated journey between 1930 and 1931. It set out from Friedrichshafen on Lake Constance in November of 1930, bound for New York. The route was ambitious. It went south through Europe, then across to West Africa, then across the South Atlantic to Brazil, then up the coast of the Americas to New York. It was not a direct crossing. It was a demonstration, a tour, a floating announcement to the world that Germany had built something extraordinary and intended everyone to know it. The journey took far longer than planned, considerably longer. There were stops, repairs, incidents, delays. In Lisbon, the aircraft caught fire in one of the engine nacelles while moored. Repairs took weeks. In the Canary Islands, there were further delays. The flight from Africa to South America went well, and when the Do X arrived in various South American ports, it was met with crowds and celebrations that speak to how genuinely astonishing the machine appeared to people who had never seen anything like it. In Rio de Janeiro, in particular, the arrival of the Do X was treated as a major event. People came to the water's edge to watch it land. Newspapers devoted front pages to it. Here was a thing from the future, arrived unexpectedly in the present. But the journey north to New York, which was always the symbolic goal, took months more than anyone had anticipated. By the time the Do X finally reached New York Harbor in August of 1931, the aircraft had been traveling for the better part of a year. It was received with considerable fanfare. New Yorkers came to see it. It was photographed constantly. And yet, even in that moment of apparent triumph, something had already begun to shift. The world into which the Do X had been born in 1929 had changed by 1931 in ways that no aircraft designer could have predicted. The Great Depression had arrived with a force that restructured everything, including the economics of luxury travel. The patrons who might have paid premium prices to cross the Atlantic in a flying palace were finding their circumstances considerably altered. The ocean liner companies, which had always been the implicit competition for the Do X's concept, were not disappearing. They were adapting, lowering prices, changing what they offered. And the aircraft itself, for all its magnificence, had revealed during its long transatlantic journey that it was not entirely reliable enough for the kind of scheduled commercial service that would have made it economically viable. There is a particular kind of sadness in the story of a magnificent thing that arrives just slightly out of its moment. The Do X was not the wrong idea. It was an idea whose time had not quite come, or whose time had been made impossible by circumstances that its creator could not control. Claude Dornier had imagined a world in which wealthy passengers would pay to cross the Atlantic in a flying hotel, and that world was not entirely unreasonable to imagine in 1926. By 1931, it was a world that had become considerably harder to sustain. Only 3 Do X aircraft were ever built. The first was the German prototype, the machine we have been discussing. The other 2 were built for Italy, under contract, and flew in Italian service for a period before they too were retired. None of the 3 survived to the present day. And the original German aircraft, after its American journey and a period of public display, was acquired by a museum in Berlin. It was destroyed, along with the building that housed it, during a bombing raid in 1943. The machine that had once crossed the Atlantic, that had been photographed in every port from Lisbon to Rio to New York, that children had pointed at and adults had stared at in disbelief, simply ceased to exist one night in a war that had no interest in elegance or history. What survives is documentation. Photographs, many of them, taken by people who sensed that what they were seeing was worth recording. Passenger accounts, some of them quite detailed, describing the experience in language that makes it still possible to imagine, across nearly a century, what it felt like to be inside that aircraft. Technical records, and a newspaper coverage from a dozen countries. And a kind of ghost that lingers in the history of aviation, the ghost of an approach to flight that was tried seriously only once, at enormous expense and ambition, and then never quite tried again in the same way. Because here is the thing that I keep returning to when I think about the Do X, and I suspect you may feel the same way. The aviation industry that developed after the Second World War chose a different set of priorities. It chose speed, and range, and capacity, and efficiency, and eventually cost reduction. Those were rational priorities. They produced the world of air travel that we know, a world of extraordinary reach and accessibility, a world where the journey from Europe to America can be accomplished in less than 8 hours and costs less, in real terms, than it did to cross by ship in 1929. That is a genuine achievement. Nobody should dismiss it. But the Do X represented a path not taken. It represented the possibility, briefly and magnificently demonstrated, that the experience of being in the air could itself be the point, that the crossing could be something you lived rather than something you endured, that an aircraft could offer not just transportation, but a form of civilization at altitude. And when that path closed, as it did close, something was lost that has never been entirely recovered. We have seen in recent years various attempts to bring luxury back to long-haul aviation. Private jet cabins designed by fashion houses, first-class suites on certain carriers that approach genuine privacy and comfort. There is a hunger for this idea that never entirely goes away. The idea that flying should be, for at least some people, an experience rather than merely a transit. Every time that hunger surfaces, it is in some sense a memory of the Do X, even if the people feeling it have never heard of the aircraft. If you have watched this far, I want to ask you something directly. What part of the Do X experience do you think would have stayed with you the longest? Was it the sight of the ocean from those windows, the sound of 12 engines turning above your head, the improbable fact of sitting down to a proper meal somewhere over the South Atlantic? Leave your answer in the comments below. I read them, and the responses to questions like this one are genuinely among the most interesting things that come from making these videos. The perspective of people who understand what travel once was, and what it might have been, is not something you find everywhere. And if you know someone, a friend, a family member, someone who loves history or classic aviation, or simply the idea of a world that took beauty seriously as a practical matter, share this video with them. These stories deserve to be heard by people who will appreciate them. The Dornier Do X was built in secret, in a lakeside factory on the Swiss shore of a German lake, by a man who believed that the air deserved something extraordinary. It crossed an ocean, slowly and imperfectly and magnificently. It was met with wonder everywhere it went, and then it was gone, consumed by a war and an era that had little room for the philosophy it represented. But here, in these photographs, in these accounts, but in the careful reconstruction of what it looked like and felt like and sounded like to be inside it, it is still possible to stand in that smoking lounge, feel the hum of those engines through the floor, look out at the Atlantic through a wide window, and understand that there was a moment, brief and unrepeatable, when flying was being imagined in a way that no one has quite dared to imagine it since. The question I want to leave you with is this. If the Do X had worked as Dornier hoped, if the economics had cooperated, and the world had not changed so brutally in those years, what kind of aviation culture would we have inherited? Would we have built more slowly, more beautifully, more ambitiously? Or would the pressures of the modern world have reshaped it anyway into what it eventually became? There is no answer, of course, but the question seems worth carrying with you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey, a subscription to the channel costs you nothing and means that the next time we go inside one of history's great lost aircraft, you will be there from the beginning. We will see you on board.